The steward at the door reached for my coat before I had finished stepping out of the night. He did it kindly, the way you take a burden from someone who looks tired, and I was tired, so I almost let him. My arm was already half extended. Then I saw the little brass tag in his other hand, the numbered stub he meant to give me in exchange, and I understood that he was not helping me carry anything. He was checking me, filing me, deciding in the half-second the club gave him that I was a coat and a claim ticket and not much else. I told him I would hold on to it, thank you. And he blinked and moved on to the couple behind me, and that was the first small thing. I want to be honest about how little it was. A man offered to hang up my coat. That is not an injury. If you had asked me, standing there in the warm light of the officers' club with the ocean somewhere behind the windows and the band tuning up in the corner, whether I had been wronged, I would have laughed. I had flown into places that wanted me dead. I had carried worse than a coat. A steward misreading me at a door was the kind of thing you let slide off. The way you let the rotor wash, push the grass flat, and then watch it stand back up when you lift. But small things have a way of stacking, on a night like that, into something you can lean against. I had come straight off travel. That is the plain reason no one in that room knew what to do with me. My flight had landed at 1600, my bags were still zipped in a rental car in the lot, and I had walked into the reception in a plain dark dress and low heels with my hair pinned back and no jewelry to speak of, because the invitation had said the evening was informal, and because I had learned a long time ago not to make an entrance I would have to live up to. I looked, I suppose, like exactly what half the room assumed I was. Somebody's +1. A wife who had come with a husband and would leave with him, and in between would hold a glass of white wine and smile at stories she was not part of. The band found its footing and slid into something low and easy. A tray of wine went by, and I took a glass I did not intend to drink, because a glass in your hand is a kind of uniform of its own, and I have never minded going quiet in a crowd. I found a place near the tall windows where I could put my back to the glass and watch the room, and I watched it. A woman I took to be an officer's wife stopped near me with a warm, managing smile and asked if I was doing all right. Did I know where the restrooms were? Was my husband one of the pilots? And I said I was fine, thank you, and let her move on, believing she had done a small kindness for a nervous newcomer. A senior chief in his dress uniform held a door for me on his way through and called me ma'am in the particular gentle register the Navy reserves for spouses and mothers, a good man being decent to a civilian, and I thanked him and meant it, because he had done nothing but be kind to a stranger he had misread. These were not injuries. I want to keep saying that, because the whole point is that none of them were injuries, and they stacked anyway. A door held, a restroom offered, a tray extended toward me as though I might be the one meant to carry it. Each one a small, correct courtesy aimed at the person they had decided I was, and each one landing gently on a person they could not see. By the time I had been in the room, 20 minutes I had been, by the room's private accounting, a coat, a nervous wife, a woman who needed the restroom, and a possible member of the catering staff. I had not corrected a single one of them. There is an art to being underestimated that you can only learn by wanting badly, once, when you were young, to be seen, and then growing all the way out of the wanting. I had grown out of it somewhere over the years, in cockpits and at gravesides, and what was left was a kind of freedom. Let the room be wrong. I knew exactly what I had carried in through that door. I knew what it was, even if the young officers filling it did not fully feel it yet. It was a change of command reception, the night before the ceremony, and there is a particular electricity to those. A squadron is about to change hands. The old commanding officer is being thanked and eased toward the door of his own life, and the new one is somewhere in the building, and everyone is a little louder than usual because change makes people loud. I watched a knot of lieutenants by the bar, landing laughing at something, their dress uniforms crisp, their wings catching the light, their whole bearing announcing that the Navy had been waiting a very long time for men as capable as they had recently discovered themselves to be. I did not resent them. I had been them. There is a year or two, early, when you have just enough skill to be dangerous and not nearly enough memory to be humble, and you walk through the world convinced the world has been improved by your arrival. It passes. For most of us it passes because something takes it out of us. Some night that does not go the way the briefing said it would, and you come home lighter by a friend and heavier by everything else, and you are never quite that loud again. I was thinking that, almost fondly, when the loudest of them turned and found me standing where I should not, in his estimation, have been standing. There were 3 of them, and the one in the middle was the kind of handsome that has never once had to be anything else. He looked me over, the way you look at a chair that has been left in a doorway. Then he smiled, and the smile was for his friends, not for me, and he said it loud enough that the smile could be shared. "Ma'am, this landing's for officers and their guests," he said. "You looking for the family side? It's back through there." He tipped his glass toward the far doors. "Somebody's wife, right? Go find your husband." His friends laughed, because that is what friends are for at that age. I had flown into places that wanted me dead. I could stand still through a boy in a dress uniform. So I stood still. I did not correct him. I did not reach for the small, hard facts I could have set on the bar between us like coins. I looked at him for a moment, long enough that a smarter man might have felt the floor tilt a half-degree under him, and then I set my untouched wine down on the ledge beside me, and I looked once across the room to the far side, where a tall officer with 4 stripes on his sleeve had just come in and was scanning the crowd for something he had not yet found. Then I looked back at the boy, and I let him have his laugh. "There you are," a voice said at my elbow, and it was the first voice all night that knew my name. Renata Fox had flown with me a lifetime ago, when we were both junior enough to think the Navy would always be this simple, and she had aged the way good pilots age, into someone whose calm you would want in the cockpit beside you when the weather turned. She had a lieutenant commander's stripes now, and a drink she was not drinking, and an expression that told me she had seen at least the tail end of the thing on the bar landing. "There I am," I said. "I watched that," she said. "I was too far to fix it." She was not asking whether I was all right. She knew better than to insult me with the question. She was telling me she had seen, which is a different and better thing. "Nothing to fix," I said, and I meant it. "He isn't wrong about the dress." Renata laughed, low, and turned so that we were both facing the room, 2 women with our backs to the windows, watching the party the way you watch weather come in off the water. It is a particular pleasure, standing next to someone you do not have to explain yourself to. Half of friendship at our age is the luxury of the unsaid. I had been the executive officer of this squadron before I left to do the year of staff work that command requires you to do, and so I knew this wardroom better than any of them realized. I knew which of the young officers were quietly excellent and which were loud and thin. I knew the chief, who ran the maintenance floor and never raised his voice, and got more out of tired sailors at 2 a.m. than any officer I had ever watched. I knew the aircraft by their tail numbers and their small, individual sicknesses, the one that always squawked a fuel imbalance that was never really there, the one everyone wanted to fly because it trimmed out sweet. Coming back to command a squadron you once served in is a strange homecoming. You return to a house you know the bones of, but the house does not know that the person walking back through the door is now the person who owns it. "Some of these kids were airmen when you were XO," Renata said, reading my face. "They won't place you. You've been gone long enough to be a legend and short enough to still be a person, which is the worst possible amount of time. They'll spend a month figuring out you're both." She smiled into her glass. "It'll do them good." I watched the young officers laugh and jostle at the bar landing, and I thought about how little any of them suspected that the woman by the windows knew the exact sound the number 7 aircraft made when it started up cold, and I let them not know it. There would be time. There is always, in command, more time for the truth to arrive than the impatient part of you wants to believe. "They don't know yet," she said. "None of them. Barrett's kept the wardroom in the dark, mostly. Half of them think the new skipper's some gray-haired terror flying in from the staff tomorrow." She sipped, finally a small sip. "Enjoy the last hour of being invisible. You won't get another one for 2 years. She was right, and we both knew exactly how right she was. Tomorrow I would stand at a podium under a tent on the flight line, in front of that whole squadron and their families and a reviewing official and a band, and I would read a single sheet of paper aloud, the orders that assigned me to command, and at the words directing me to relieve, I would turn to Neil Barrett and say the old formal sentence, "I relieve you, sir," and he would say the other half of it, "I stand relieved," and in the space of that exchange, several hundred people would become mine to answer for. Their training, their aircraft, their safety on nights that would not go the way the briefing said, their letters home if it came to that. All of it would cross from his shoulders to mine on a sentence, and none of them tomorrow would look at me and see a wife in a doorway. Tonight they did, and I found, standing next to Renata with the band playing and the boy on the bar landing still laughing at his own reflection, that I did not mind the rest of the evening as nobody. There is a stillness in being underestimated that you cannot buy any other way. When a room has already decided you are furniture, it stops performing for you, and you get to see it as it actually is. I saw Neil Barrett across the floor, the outgoing commanding officer, a compact and decent man who had held the squadron through 2 hard deployments and looked tired in the particular way of someone about to hand over a thing he loves. He caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. Private, one professional to another, an acknowledgement that we both knew what the room did not. Then his wife pulled him back into a conversation and he went, gracefully, the way he did everything. That lieutenant, Renata said, following my gaze back to the bar landing. Whitmore, he's yours now, you know. One of your junior pilots. Good hands, I hear. Terrible mouth. I gathered, I said. He has no idea, she said. And there was something almost gentle in how she said it, because Renata had been in the Navy long enough to know that there are few things in life as complete as the ignorance of a young man, one sentence, before he learns something. I watched Dane Whitmore laugh, and I did not feel angry. I felt, if anything, a strange tenderness for how little he knew. He did not know who I was. He did not know that in the morning he would stand in ranks and watch the woman he had waved toward the family side take command of the squadron he flew for. And he did not know the other thing, the thing none of them knew, the thing his careless little sentence had reached into me and touched without any idea it was touching anything at all. Go find your husband. I did have a husband. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this the kind of thing that curdles, and it was not that. It was only true. His name was Theo, and he flew, and I met him the year I earned my wings. In the particular chaos of a fleet squadron, where everyone is exhausted and young and briefly certain they will live forever. He was better than me in the aircraft and worse than me at admitting it, and he laughed at things a half beat before he should have. And he had a way of putting his hand flat between my shoulder blades when we stood in a crowd that said, without a word, I am here, I have got you, keep going. We married between deployments in a courthouse with 2 friends as witnesses and a dinner afterward that ran late, and we were happy in the unglamorous, interrupted way that 2 people in uniform are allowed to be happy. In the seams, between the things the Navy asked of us, he was killed in the spring of 2016. It was not combat. It was a night operational flight, a training detachment, a set of conditions that lined up the wrong way over dark water, and the board that studied it afterward used the flat, careful language those boards use, and the language did not bring him back. I was lieutenant commander by then. I learned what it is to be on the receiving side of the visit, the 2 officers at the door in their service dress, their faces arranged into the expression they are taught, and I learned that no amount of wearing that uniform yourself prepares you for the moment it comes to your own porch to take something from you. I have a folded flag in a cabinet at home. 13 folds, tucked into a triangle, blue field and white stars showing, the way they hand it to you at the end. I was somebody's wife. I had the flag to prove it. So when the boy on the bar landing told me to go find my husband, he had thrown, without any aim at all, the truest sentence anyone would say to me that night. And it went in clean, the way the true ones do, and I stood there with my face still and let it travel all the way down and settle where the others live. Because there is an older one, under Theo. And the reception noise thinned for a second the way it does when the past decides to come up for air. And I was not in the club anymore. I was in the spring of 2011, over Helmand, at night, with the aircraft loud around me and my aircrewman's voice in my headset. We had gone in to pull out a reconnaissance element that had been compromised on a ridge, 4 men pinned and one of them hurt, and the landing zone was hot in the way that word tries and fails to hold, the air itself seeming to come apart with light. I put the helicopter down where the plan said not to, and held it there while my crew worked, and the man in the door beside me, running the hoist and returning fire, and keeping his voice level for my sake as much as his, was a petty officer named Luis Farrow, 24 years old, who called me by my call sign and told me the aircraft was clear to come up in the same steady tone. He used to tell me the coffee in the ready room was bad. We got the recon element out, all 4. The hurt one lived. And somewhere in the coming up, in the last of the light and the noise, Farrow stopped talking, and I did not understand at first. And then I did, and I flew the rest of it with the understanding sitting in the seat behind me where he had been. They gave me a distinguished flying cross for that night, a cross with a small bronze letter on the ribbon that means the thing was done under fire. I keep it in the same cabinet as the flag, which is either a terrible arrangement or the only honest one, because they came from the same country and the same uniform and the same set of choices. And I have never once looked at the medal without seeing the seat behind me empty. People imagine that a decoration like that arrives as pride, and part of it is. I will not lie about that. But mostly it arrives as arithmetic. They pinned it on me in a hanger in front of a formation, and I stood very straight and said the correct short things afterward to the people who wanted a photograph. And the whole time there was a family somewhere getting a different visit than mine. The visit I would learn about firsthand 5 years later, and I could not make the two facts sit anywhere but side by side. I flew well enough that 4 men went home. I flew in a night that took Louis Farrow from a mother in a town I have since driven through on purpose, slowly, once, to see the streets he grew up on. Both true. Always both. That is what the word wife had touched, standing by the windows. And I want you to understand, it was not a wound the way an insult is a wound. It was a wound the way a scar is, an old healed thing that has become part of the structure, that you forget is there until a particular kind of weather finds it. Theo had been gone 10 years. I had built an entire life on the far side of losing him. A good life. A life with work I believed in, and friends like Renata and a squadron I had climbed 20 years to be handed. I did not walk around grieving. I want to be clear about that, because there is a way of telling a story like mine that turns a whole woman into nothing but her losses, and I have refused that telling my entire life. I am not my dead. I carry them. It is not the same thing. But grief does not check the calendar for your convenience, and the change of command had fallen by the blind arithmetic of the detailer who cut my orders in the same week of the same month that I had lost him. And so I had come to this reception already carrying more than my plain dress suggested, already holding the particular tenderness that comes over you in the anniversary weeks, when the ordinary membrane between now and then goes thin. And a boy had looked at me and seen none of it, which was not his fault, and had told me to go find my husband, which was. I breathed out, slow, near the tall windows, and the band came back up, and the party reassembled itself around me, loud and young and unknowing, and I was Commander Adrian Keller again, standing in a plain dark dress the night before I took command. A widow and a pilot and a woman a boy had mistaken for furniture. I picked my wine back up. I still did not drink it, and across the room, the tall officer with the 4 gold stripes finally found what he had been looking for all night, and it was me. I knew who he was before he reached me, because a captain in the Navy carries a room with him whether he wants to or not. His name was Elliot Shaw, and he commanded the installation, which is to say the whole air station, the runways and the hangars, and the thousands of people who kept the aircraft flying, and I had met him twice before, in the careful, brief way that a commander meets a captain, and he had struck me both times as a man who had held on to something a lot of people lose on the way up, which is the memory of what it was like down here. He was tall and gray at the temples, and he wore his dress blues, the way men wear a uniform they have long since stopped needing to prove anything with. He had a glass in his hand, and I watched him set it down on a passing tray without looking at it, the way you set down something you are done with, and then he came across the floor. He came the whole length of it. That is the part I keep. He did not send an aide. He did not lift a hand and wait for me to make my way to him through the crowd, which is what rank usually lets you do, which is what rank is partly for. He crossed the room himself, on his own 2 feet, through the knots of officers and spouses, past the bar and the band and the long table of little food no one was eating, and the room opened for him the way rooms do, and heads turned to see where a captain was going, in such a straight line with such an unguarded look on his face. He walked past the bar landing. He walked past the 3 lieutenants. He walked directly past Dane Whitmore, close enough that the boy could have reached out and touched his sleeve, and he did not slow down, and he did not so much as glance at him. And I watched Whitmore's smile begin to change in the way a thing changes when the ground it is standing on begins, very slightly, to move. Captain Shaw stopped in front of me and put out his hand, and his face was glad, plainly and without performance glad, the way you are glad to finally see the person you have been holding a whole evening open for. "Commander Keller," he said. "There you are. We've been holding the evening for you." I took his hand. "Sir," I said, "I'm sorry. My flight ran late and I came straight from it. I should have found you first." "You should have done no such thing," he said. "You should have gotten off an airplane and had a glass of wine, which appears to be exactly what you've done." He looked at the wine in my hand, still full, and something in his eye said he saw that it was still full, and understood everything that meant, the whole discipline of a woman who keeps a glass she does not drink. "Tomorrow you take my finest squadron. Tonight you are my guest. I have been telling people all night that they were about to meet the officer who flew the Helmand rescue, and half of them didn't believe such a person would be at a party in a plain dress by the window, he smiled. "You've made a liar of me in the best possible way." The room heard it. Not all of it, but the part that mattered, the near part, the part that included a bar landing and 3 young officers, and one of them in particular. I did not look at Whitmore. I did not have to. I could feel the change in the air, the way you feel a pressure drop before the weather turns. The specific quality of a silence that has just been handed a fact it got exactly backward. He walked past the boy who had sent me to find my husband, and he had not so much as glanced at him. And now the boy stood there with the understanding arriving in stages across his face, the way dawn arrives, gray first, and then all at once. What happened next was almost worse to watch than the insult had been, and it taught me something about rooms. They overcorrected? Of course they did. Within a minute, the space around me, which had been empty all evening, because empty is what a room gives to someone it has decided does not count, began to fill. Officers I had never met found reasons to be near me. A commander from the staff introduced himself with a warmth that had not existed for me 10 minutes earlier and would not have appeared at all if a captain had not just walked the length of the floor. Someone's wife told me she had heard so much about me, which was not possible because there had been nothing to hear until 90 seconds ago. The introductions came fast, and they were all, underneath their words, the same word, and the word was sorry, and none of them were saying it to me for anything they personally had done, which is how a room apologizes, by crowding. I have thought a great deal since about that crowding, because it told me something true about people that I do not think they would want me to know. Not one of the officers now pressing in to be near me had done a single thing wrong to me all evening. Their crime, if it was one, was that they had let the room decide for them, the way most people let most rooms decide for them most of the time. They had walked past the woman by the windows without a thought, not out of cruelty, but out of the ordinary economy of attention. And now that a captain had crossed the floor and reassigned my value, they were rushing to align themselves with the new number. It was not malice. It was worse than malice in a way, because malice at least sees you. This was a room revealing that it had never been looking at me at all, only at my rank, and adjusting its warmth to match the moment the rank became visible. I was polite to all of them. I want to be clear that I did not punish the crowding either. A commanding officer who holds a grudge against everyone who underestimated her before they knew her name would have no one left to command, because everyone underestimates everyone before they know the name. That is not a flaw in people. That is just people. But I noted it, the way you note the wind, not to be angry at it, only to fly accordingly. And in the middle of all that filling, a space opened. Around Whitmore. His 2 friends had drifted. That is the thing about friends at that age, the same thing that makes them laugh on cue makes them step back on cue. And they had read the room faster than he had and put a polite yard of distance between themselves and the lieutenant who had just insulted the incoming commanding officer in front of the installation captain. He stood on the bar landing more or less alone, holding a drink he had stopped drinking, and I could see him running it back, the whole exchange, hunting through it for the place where it could still be a misunderstanding and not finding one. He was waiting for the blow. I knew the posture. It is the posture of a young man who has just understood the size of his mistake and is bracing for the correction he assumes is coming, because in his experience, so far correction always comes, loud and public and from above, and the only question is how bad. The room wanted it. That is the part I want to be exact about, because it is the part people do not admit. The room, having gotten me wrong, now wanted very much to watch me make it right at the boy's expense. There is an appetite in a crowd for that particular justice, the neat kind, the kind that closes the loop in one satisfying sentence. They wanted me to turn to Dane Whitmore and put one cold, precise, unanswerable line through him and let them all exhale. I could feel the wanting like a hand at my back. Renata found her way to my side again, and she leaned in, and under the noise she said the thing the whole room was thinking, but she said it as a friend, which is to say she said it to give me permission and not to push me. "You could ruin his whole year with one sentence," she said. "Nobody would blame you, nobody in this room. Some of them would love you for it." She was right. That was the trouble. She was completely right. I looked at Dane Whitmore across the little vacuum the party had opened around him, and I made myself actually see him, past the arrogance, which is easy to hate, to the thing under it, which is harder. He was young. Not young the way I say it to be kind. Young the way a fact is a fact. He was 27 years old, and he had good hands in an aircraft according to people who would know, and he had a mouth that had gotten there ahead of his judgment, and he had just done, in front of everyone who mattered, the single, most humiliating thing a junior officer can do, and he knew it, and he was standing there taking the weight of it with a drink he could not drink, waiting for me to make it unsurvivable. I decided, standing by the windows with the whole room leaning toward the pleasure of watching me strike, that I was not going to give it to them. I want to explain the decision honestly, because if I tell it as mercy, it becomes a performance, and it was not mercy, or not only. It was command. Those are not the same thing, and I have watched officers confuse them their whole careers. Here is what I knew that the room, in its appetite, had forgotten. In the morning, that boy would not be a stranger who had been rude to me at a party. He would be one of my pilots. He would strap into an aircraft that I was responsible for and fly it in weather and dark and on nights that did not go the way the briefing said. And on one of those nights, the thing that would keep him and his crew alive might very well be whether he trusted the voice in his headset that belonged to me. A commanding officer who humiliates a junior officer in front of the wardroom the night before taking command has taught that wardroom precisely one lesson, and it is not respect. It is fear, and fear is a tool that works exactly until the moment you need something better than fear, which in my line of work is most moments that count. If I put Whitmore on the floor in front of everyone, I would have been right. Loudly, deliciously, unanswerably right. And I would have spent in that one sentence something I could not get back. The chance to be the kind of leader a frightened young pilot tells the truth to at 0300 when he has made a mistake, and there is still time to fix it if only he will say it out loud. I have known commanders that no one told the truth to. Their squadrons were quiet and correct and brittle, and things broke in them that did not have to break, because somewhere a young officer decided it was safer to hide a problem than to bring it to a person who might make him feel the way I could make Whitmore feel in the next 10 seconds. I could be right, loudly, tonight. Or I could be his commanding officer in the morning. I did not see a way to be both. So I set my wine down for the last time, and I gave my coat finally to a passing steward, properly, with a word of thanks, because I was done being the woman with a burden over her arm. I squared myself the small amount you square yourself before you cross a room on purpose. Renata caught the change in me and stepped back half a pace, and I saw her almost smile because she had flown with me long enough to know what it looked like when I had picked a heading and meant to hold it. And then I did the thing the room did not expect, the thing that disappointed its appetite and, I think, in the end unsettled it, far more than any clean, cruel sentence would have. I did not summon Whitmore. I did not make him come to me across the floor to be corrected, which would have been its own smaller theater. I crossed the room to him. I walked, on my own 2 feet, the way a captain had just walked to me, through the same crowd, and I stopped in front of the boy who had told me to go find my husband, and I put out my hand. Up close, the arrogance was already gone, and what was left was just a young man who had not slept well in anticipation of a change of command that had, in the last 2 minutes, become a great deal more personal than he had planned. Whitmore looked at my hand as though it might be a trap. I understood the instinct. In his world, a superior officer who approaches you after you have wronged them is not offering a handshake. They are choosing the ground for the correction, and he was braced for it. Chin up, eyes forward, the whole rigid architecture a young officer builds when he thinks he's about to be taken apart. His 2 friends had reappeared at the edges of the moment because now it was going to be a show, and a show is worth returning for. I kept my hand out, and after a second that lasted longer than a second, he took it. "Commander Keller," I said. I said it plainly, without weight, the way you introduce yourself to someone you will be working alongside for a long time, because that was the truth of it. "I have the squadron in the morning. I'll see you at quarters." That was all. I did not say the rest. I did not say the part he had earned, the part the room was waiting for, and I watched him wait for it, and I watched him understand, slowly, that it was not coming. There is a specific kind of silence that opens in a person when the punishment they braced for does not arrive, and it is a more effective teacher than any punishment because they are left holding the whole weight of the thing themselves, with no one to be angry at but the person in the mirror. "Ma'am," he said. His voice had lost all its landing bar confidence. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't. I had no idea who you were." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's not." He stopped. He was trying to find the honest version, and to his credit, he kept looking for it instead of grabbing the easy one. "That's not an excuse. It shouldn't matter who you were. I shouldn't have said it to anyone." And there it was. That was the sentence I had been hoping was somewhere in him, the one that told me Renata was right about his hands and that the mouth was a young man's problem and not a rotten man's character, because a rotten man defends the insult by pointing at the disguise. And this one had just, on his own, without my help, arrived at the thing that actually mattered, which is that you do not measure how you treat a person by how much rank they turn out to have. "No," I agreed. "It shouldn't have mattered who I was. Remember that you got there by yourself. I didn't have to walk you to it." I let go of his hand. "It's a good instinct. Hold on to it." Around us, the room had gone quiet in a held-breath way, waiting still for the blow, and I could feel the disappointment when it registered that there was not going to be one, and under the disappointment something else, harder to name, that I have come to think was a kind of unease. A clean, cruel sentence would have let them all relax, because it would have closed the story into a shape they knew. By not giving it to them, I had left the story open, and an open story makes a room think, and rooms do not always thank you for making them think. I did not need Dane Whitmore on the floor. I want to be clear about the arithmetic of it, because it is the whole point. I needed him at his aircraft at 0600 with his head right. I needed him to be, in 8 hours, a pilot who trusted his squadron and was trusted by it, and there is no version of that pilot that I could have built out of a public humiliation the night before. The Navy had given me, in one careless boy, a perfect chance to be feared, and I had turned it down on purpose because I was not there to be feared. I was there to command, which is a slower and less satisfying and infinitely more useful thing. "Get some sleep, Lieutenant," I said. "Tomorrow's a long day for both of us." And I turned and I walked back across the room, and the loudest thing in the whole club was how completely ordinary I had kept my voice. The story traveled the wardroom that night the way stories do, which is faster than any aircraft any of us flew. I did not spread it. I did not have to. Renata told me later that by the time the reception ended and the junior officers had migrated to wherever junior officers migrate to keep an evening alive, the whole squadron knew, in the compressed and slightly mythologized form these things take, that the new skipper had been called somebody's wife by Whitmore at the club, and had answered by walking across the room and introducing herself and letting him live. And I understood, hearing that the choice I had made by the windows was already doing the work I had made it to do. Before I had read a single order, before I had signed for a single aircraft, the wardroom had learned something about the person who was about to command them, and it was a better thing than they would have learned from a beheading. But the real weight, the full weight, did not land on Dane Whitmore that night. The party let him off easy, in a way, because a party is dark and loud and forgiving, and there is always the possibility, at a party, of telling yourself in the morning that it was not as bad as it felt. The morning did not offer him that. The change of command was at 1000 on the flight line, under the long white tent, with the aircraft parked behind us as a backdrop, and the band in their whites and the families in their good clothes on rows of folding chairs and the flag standing out stiff in the wind off the water. I wore my service dress blues, the gold wings over the ribbons in their exact order, the distinguished flying cross where it goes. And I stood beside Neil Barrett while the chaplain spoke, and the reviewing official spoke, and Barrett spoke. And then it was my turn to do the only part that is not a speech. I read my orders. You read them aloud, all of them, the dry bureaucratic sentences that direct you to proceed and report and relieve, and the whole tent listens to language that has not changed much in 200 years. And at the end of it, you turn to the officer you are relieving and you say the sentence. "I relieve you, sir," I said. "I stand relieved," Neil Barrett said. And he stepped back, and the squadron was mine. And it was there, in the ranks, in daylight, with no party to soften it, and no drink to blame, and no dark to hide in, that the thing finally reached Dane Whitmore all the way down. He was standing at attention in his formation with the other pilots, and I could not have singled him out, even if I had wanted to, and I did not want to, but I did not have to. He was watching the woman he had waved toward the family side take command of the squadron he had staked his young identity on, and I could see, even from the podium, even across all that distance and ceremony, the exact moment the full size of it arrived. The party had let him call it a misunderstanding. The morning showed him it was his commanding officer, in front of his squadron, in front of the families, in front of the captain, in a uniform heavy with the proof of a night over Helmand he had no idea about, and there was nowhere in any of that for the story to be smaller than it was. I met his eyes once, and only for the length of time it takes to pass over a face in a formation you are now responsible for. I gave him nothing that anyone watching could have named, and I gave him everything he needed, which was a level, ordinary, unsurprised look. The look that says, "I see you, I have not forgotten, and I am not going to use it." It is a look that costs a young officer more than a reprimand and gives him more than forgiveness, because it hands him the whole weight and trusts him to carry it, and trust, at that age, is the heaviest thing anyone can hand you. Then I moved my eyes on down the ranks, because they were all mine now, every one of them, and none of them belonged to me any more or less than any other, and that is the first thing a squadron needs to learn about the person in front of it. They gave me the keys to the commanding officer's office that afternoon, and I sat in it alone that first evening in the low gold light off the water, and I let myself feel the whole of it, which was not the clean, triumphant thing you might expect. The office was still mostly Barrett's, in the way an office is for a week after a change of command. Half his life boxed on the floor, and half mine not yet unboxed against the wall. And I sat in the chair that was now mine at the desk that was now mine, and I did not turn on the lamp. I let it get dark slowly. Command is what I had worked for, 20 years of it, the deployments and the boards and the schools and the moves, the whole long climb that most people never see the point of until they are near the top of it. And I had reached the thing, the actual thing, my name on the door and a squadron in my hands, and I found that the feeling in my chest was not the feeling I had rehearsed, because Theo was not going to see it. That is the plain arithmetic of a life like mine, and there is no honest way around it. I got the thing I had worked 20 years for in the same week of the same month that I had. 10 years before, lost the man I would have traded all of it to keep. The anniversary and the achievement lived in the same 7 days of the calendar. The way the flag and the medal live in the same cabinet, and nobody warns you that both can be completely true at once, that you can sit in a chair you earned and feel it and grieve in the same breath and not be able to tell, from the inside, where one ends and the other starts. I thought about Pharaoh. I do, on the days that matter. I thought about a 24-year-old petty officer telling me the aircraft was clear to come up in the same voice he used to complain about the coffee, and I thought about how the command I had just taken traced, if you followed the line all the way back, through that night and that seat and that voice, because everything I am as a pilot was finished on the far side of the worst thing that ever happened in an aircraft I was flying. You do not get to keep the parts of the story you like and set down the parts you do not. It comes as one thing. The cross came from the same night as the empty seat. The command came from the same 20 years as the folded flag. I sat with that for a long time in the dark office, and I did not try to make it into a lesson, because it is not one. It is just the shape of a certain kind of life, the shape of any life long enough and lucky enough and unlucky enough to accumulate both the medals and the losses that the medals are made of. When you are young, you think the good things and the hard things will arrive in separate seasons, that you will grieve for a while and then be done and then be happy. In that order, cleanly. Nobody tells you they come braided. Nobody tells you that the proudest morning of your professional life can land in the saddest week of your personal one, and that you will stand at a podium reading orders in a voice that does not shake, while a whole other set of dates runs quietly underneath the ceremony, like a second frequency only you can hear. I thought about the 4 men from the Ridge. They would be in their late 30s now, most of them, with children, with ordinary Tuesdays, with the particular gift of a life that almost was not. I had never met them again, and I did not need to. Their being alive was not a debt anyone owed me. It was just true, the way the empty seat was true, part of the same night, part of the same braid. I could have made the boy at the party pay, and it would have felt for about a minute like something. And it would have been so small, next to this, next to the actual weight of what I was sitting inside of, that I was almost embarrassed the room had wanted it so badly. And a little that some part of me had wanted it too. A clean, cruel sentence to a lieutenant. As if that were even in the same universe as a folded flag, as a voice on an intercom that stops, as a squadron full of other people's sons and daughters that I was now supposed to keep alive. There was a photograph in the top box against the wall, and I knew which one, and I did not take it out yet. Some things you unpack when the office is yours, and not before. But I let myself know it was there. Theo laughing a half-beat early at something outside the frame, his hand not in the picture, but I knew exactly where it would have been, flat and warm between my shoulder blades, holding me up in a crowd. I am here. I have got you. Keep going. I turned off nothing because I had turned on nothing. I just sat, in the last of the light, in a dark that came up slow off the water, steady, the way you learn to be steady, and I let the 2 true things be true. And after a while, I stood up and squared the boxes against the wall and went to meet my squadron. Dane Whitmore came to see me on the 3rd day, and he came the right way, which is to say he came expecting to pay. He asked my yeoman for 2 minutes, and he got them. And he came through the door and stood at attention in front of the desk in a manner so correct it was almost painful. Cover under his arm, eyes fixed on a point over my shoulder, the whole posture of a young man who has spent 3 days building the courage for a conversation he is sure will cost him. I let him stand there a moment, not to make him suffer, but because a man who has come to say something hard should be allowed to say it in his own time and not have it taken from him by kindness too quickly offered. "At ease, Lieutenant," I said. "Say what you came to say." "Ma'am," he said, "I came to apologize. Properly. Not the version at the club, which was, I was caught out and embarrassed, and I don't think that counts. I've had 3 days to think about it. He swallowed. What I said to you was contemptible. I looked at a person, and I decided she was nobody, and I said so, out loud, to make my friends laugh. And the only reason it became a problem I have to fix is that the nobody turned out to be my commanding officer. If you had actually been a spouse who wandered onto the wrong landing, I'd have done the same thing and never thought about it again. And that's worse, ma'am. That's the part I can't sit with. Whoever you were, I had no business. I let that stand in the room for a second because it deserved to. You know what most people would have done, I said, is come in here and apologize for insulting a commander. You just apologize for insulting a person. That's the whole difference, Lieutenant, and most officers never find it. Some find it at your age, some find it at 50, some retire without it. I set down my pen. You don't owe me an apology for the party. You already paid for the party in the ranks on the flight line, and I watched you pay it, and it was enough. What you owe to every person you fly with and every person on the ground who trusts you to be better than the man on that landing. Start there. That's the only apology I actually want, and you'll be paying it your whole career, and that's how it should be. Yes, ma'am, he said, and this time the 2 words meant it. There is a way a young officer says yes, ma'am when it is reflex, and a way he says it when something has actually changed shape inside him, and I had heard enough of both to know the difference. One more thing, I said, and he braced, because he thought this was where the price finally came due. I'm told you have good hands. Renata Fox doesn't say that about people to be nice, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to be one of the best pilots in my squadron because you have it in you, and every time your mouth gets out ahead of you again, and it will, because you're 27, you're going to remember the club, and it's going to pull you up a half second faster than it did this time. That's not a punishment. That's the use of a mistake. Dismissed, Lieutenant. He came to attention, and he held it a beat longer than the regulation required, which is the only way at that rank you are permitted to say thank you to a commanding officer, and then he was gone, and I sat looking at the door for a while after it closed. The squadron became mine the way a squadron does, which is not in a moment, but in 1,000 of them. I flew with them. That is the fastest way and the oldest, and there is no substitute for it. A commanding officer who leads from a desk is a rumor to her people, and a rumor cannot be trusted at 0300. So I put myself on the schedule the first week, and I strapped into an aircraft with crews who were quietly taking my measure, and I let them take it, because that is their right and their job. I flew a night event that first week, low over Blackwater, the aircraft loud and familiar around me, a young air crewman in the door running the checks. And when his voice came steady in my headset, telling me the cabin was ready, I felt the old line reach all the way back to a different door and a different voice, and I flew the event clean, and I did not say any of that to the crew, because it was mine to carry and not theirs. Word got around, though, in the way it does, that the new skipper had put herself on the night schedule her first week, and that she had flown the low event over the water without drama, and had thanked the air crewman by name in the debrief, and had stayed to help close out the aircraft instead of walking off to her car. Small things, but a squadron is built out of small things, the same way it is broken by them, and the crews began, gradually, to relax around me, not into casualness, which is dangerous, but into trust, which is the whole point. A young pilot brought me a problem in the second week, an honest problem, a mistake he had made in the pattern that no one had caught, and he brought it to me himself before anyone made him, and I watched him brace the way Whitmore had braced, and I did not put him on the floor either, and I saw the same thing travel the wardroom afterward, and I understood that the club had not been one night's decision. It had been the first sentence of a language I was going to be speaking to these people for 2 years, and they had heard it, and they were beginning to answer in the same language, which is a thing you cannot order and can only demonstrate. Renata found me at the end of that first week, and we had a drink, one, the way we always had, in a quiet corner where 2 women who had flown together a lifetime ago could stop being ranks for an hour. You could have ended him, she said, meaning Whitmore, meaning the club, going back to it the way you go back to a thing that has kept turning over in you. I know, I said. I'd have understood if you had. She turned her glass. I think I even wanted you to. I'm not proud of that. The room wanted me to, I said. That's exactly why I didn't. The day a room's appetite starts making my decisions, I should hand the squadron to someone steadier. I looked out at the flight line. The aircraft settled in their rows under the lights. He's going to be a good officer, Wren. Better than if I'd broken him. You don't build the pilot you want out of a person you've humiliated. You build a person who hides things from you. I've flown for commanders like that. I buried a friend once partly because of a squadron where nobody felt safe saying a thing was wrong until it already was. Renata was quiet a moment. You never told me that. There's a lot I never told you, I said, and she let it be, the way friends do. And we finished our drinks and watched the aircraft, and it was enough. Neil Barrett left the following week the way outgoing commanders leave, quietly and all at once, his boxes gone from the office and his name off the door and a new life somewhere ahead of him. He stopped in before he went, and he looked around the office that had been his for 2 years and was mine now, and he nodded, satisfied, the way a man nods at a thing he is glad to be leaving in good hands. I heard about the club, he said at the door. The whole base heard about the club, he smiled. You could have taught them to be afraid of you in one night. Instead, you taught them something harder to teach and worth a great deal more. I spent 2 years trying to build that in this wardroom. You did it before you'd read your orders. He put out his hand. They're lucky, Adrian. Take care of them. I stand relieved, sir, I said, which was not the right sentence for the moment and was exactly the right sentence for the moment. And he laughed, and he was gone. I want to say something to whoever is still here, because I think some of you have stood in a doorway and been read wrong by a room, and I know how that lands. Maybe you were the spouse someone waved toward the family side. Maybe you were the quiet one at the table people talked over. Maybe you carried something into a room that nobody there could see, a loss, a history, a whole life of the kind of work that does not show, and someone decided in half a second that you were furniture, and said so, and laughed. If that has happened to you, I want to tell you the thing that night left me with. And it is not what you might expect me to say. It is not that you should make them pay. You could sometimes. There is often a sentence available that would close the loop and give the room its neat little justice, and I am not going to pretend it is never tempting, because it is. But dignity is not the same thing as the last word. I have watched people spend the truest thing about themselves, buying a moment of being right in front of a crowd. And it is a bad trade, every time, because the crowd forgets by morning, and you are left having become, for one sentence, a little more like the person who wronged you. Here is the better thing. The truth about who you are does not need the room's permission to be true. I was a commander and a pilot and a widow and the one who flew the Helmand rescue, and I was all of that while a boy was telling me to go find my husband, and his not knowing did not make it 1 degree less true. It never does. What you have carried is carried, whether or not anyone in the doorway can see the weight of it. So let the room be wrong about you if it wants to. Set your glass down, keep your voice level, and be, in the morning, in the daylight, in front of everyone, exactly and completely who you already were in the dark. I was somebody's wife. I have the folded flag to prove it, and I would not trade it or him for anything I have earned since. I am also the one who has the squadron. Both of those are the whole truth, at the same time, in the same chest, and I have stopped needing anyone to understand how they fit. Set your glass down, keep your voice level, be who you are in the morning. The end.